For over 100 years, groups and politicians in the United States have launched xenophobic attacks against immigrants with one goal: to create a false connection between immigrants and drugs for political gain. These lies have informed the foundation of America's immigration policy, and in turn helped create the largest exclusion, detention, and deportation machine in the entire world. So when did America start using immigrants as scapegoats for drugs and crime? The first drug laws targeting immigrants were passed in the 1870s. Anti-opium laws were directed at Chinese immigrants, even though opium products were more readily available than cigarettes were in the 1970s. Chinese immigrants were easy scapegoats for a wide variety of economic and cultural issues. This continued throughout the early 1900s. Anti-cocaine laws were directed at black men in the South. Anti-marijuana laws in the Midwest and Southwest targeted Mexican Americans and Mexican migrants. Fast forward to the 1960s, and drugs came to represent rebellion, social upheaval, and political dissent. This wasn't convenient for soon-to-be President Richard Nixon, whose personal vendetta against drugs lined up with his ambitions for public office.
Come out the winner of the decisive winner of the primaries will go on to win the nomination.
In the 1970s, he launched the War on Drugs with the goal to eradicate illicit drug use in the United States. Police disproportionately focused enforcement of the drug war in Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities, including immigrant communities.
Number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Nixon's former domestic policy advisor even admitted that the war on drugs was meant to criminalize black people.
Getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities.
This racially targeted enforcement created a connection based on prejudice rather than fact. While data shows that people of all races and ethnicities use and sell drugs at similar rates, the false narrative in America told a different story. Communities of color, immigrants included, equals more drugs and more crime. This, along with the war on drugs through the 1980s and 90s, gave way to some of the most racist pieces of anti-immigrant legislation that still exists today. There's no bigger example of this than in 1996, when the Clinton administration passed two bills that placed the drug war at the center of the US's deportation machine. As a result, many drug law violations subject immigrants to significantly harsher punishments than US citizens. And when people are arrested for a suspected criminal offense, the pressure to accept a plea deal is enormous, leading 97% of all people facing charges to accept plea deals. For non-citizens, many do so without knowing or understanding the immigration consequences of a conviction, resulting in being torn from their family or exiled to another country. Sadly, this vicious cycle has only continued throughout the 2000s. We've seen increased deportations, the militarization of the US-Mexico border, and expanded enforcement of and incarceration for immigration offenses. We must undo the discriminatory drug laws that fuel over-policing, mass incarceration, and deportations in this country.